2 minutes late, but I guess better late than never. Bria, good to see you here. Hope you had a good time on the road on your anniversary. Sharon, also good to have you here. Christine, Anna, Laurie, Alina, the folks from Patreon are here. Good to have you here. Alina. The folks from Patreon are here. Good to have you here. Alina. Let me just turn the sound off here. Okay. First, mine filtered out. How are you guys all doing? Your sound is very bad. Okay. How does it sound now? Never watch Silence of the Lambs. Okay. Well, maybe that's something you can put on your to-watch list. Do you guys know about the movie The Silence of the Lambs? Rebecca, thank you. Do you know the movie The Silence of the Lambs that involved profiling? It was sort of the first time that profiling really entered the mainstream narrative. It came out in the 90s. Yeah, very good film. And there's a moment in the film where Hannibal Lecter wants to go into the mind of the secret agent and he about the foundational memories that she has of her own, I think, adopted family. I think it's basically one of her worst memories. And that is where the title for the movie, where Hannibal says, you know, I think what you want is to silence the screaming of the lambs. And she's wishing that she could just save one of the lambs. So that's actually where it came from. So it's actually quite an interesting scenario. I wonder why the what being on YouTube is inverted. It's the first time that has happened. The picture should be on that side. Really weird. Look, okay, that's interesting. Stephanie might be here a little bit later. I know she's on a riverboat or something, but we might actually see her joining us quite soon. Anthony Hopkins is brilliant, absolutely. Random Christian musings. If you're a farmer, please be careful. I'm not a farmer, I'm an author, but thanks for that. Appreciate it. Sammy Schuyler, hi from Italy. Daffodils says hi to Timmy. Do you guys want to see Timmy? He's doing his usual, now that you're going live, I need all your attention thing. And then he like licks my hand like for minutes on end. Joe O'Sullivan, hello from London. So you guys have just sort of tuned in. I guess once we're at about 1,000 watching, hopefully we get there. I'm going to talk to you about in the Summer Wells case, and then we're going to go through a couple of other areas. We're going to go into more of the context of the timeline. We're going to go into kind of rumor control. We're going to go into another question that I don't think has ever been asked, that I think is quite important, regarding the facts of this case. Then I'm going to touch on something Chris McDonough is going to be, I guess, discussing tomorrow about the 40 minutes. I'm just going to be touching lightly on that. And then if there's time, I might deal with questions, but I really want to deal with the questions tomorrow. And then the final thing I want to deal with is to do with, and by then, some of you guys who are interested in the Wells case, you might want to leave at that point, because it's a little bit beyond the scope of it. But we're going to talk about the bond that you have with your pet or with your dog, and that a lot of people actually overestimated. And we're going to apply that in a way to the Summer Wells case to say, you know, if you overestimate your bond with your dog, you know, if my dog could talk, what do you think he would say about me? It might not be as flattering as you might think. He might say, well, you know what, this guy sits around waffling all day and I kind of need a lot more exercise. In any event, we're going to look at the science behind the bonding of pets with their owners, and then look at a little bit of intertextuality with the Wells family. I like the example because it's kind of a neutral example. It's just looking at something in a different way. So that's really the point of it. I love you, but feed me. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so I'm going to just do a few more greets. I'm just going to greet a couple of you guys for a couple of more minutes, say 4 more minutes, and then we'll get started. So if you want to make a cup of coffee, if you want to just quickly run an errand, you're welcome to do that. So I'm just going to greet you guys. Sinead Devlin from Ireland. You were up quite late. Wow, Christine, thanks a lot. Did you read my mail? I know there's a lot to take in. I think I have read it, but I don't know if I've read it in enough detail, so I'll try and go through it again. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. I don't know if do you want me to comment directly to you, or I'm not quite sure, but I will get back to you when I've got a little bit more time. But it was pretty, from what I saw, it is pretty heavy content. I always feel like I need to completely drop everything when it's stuff like that, because it's something that's so personal. Tony Johnson, hi there. Janae Ann. Janae's asking, Kathy, where you from? Hi from Florida. Texas here, Ashley Garrett. Finola, it's only 10 past 8 in Ireland. Okay, well, it's an hour later here. Who did the painting of Summer with a house? I'm not actually sure, but it has to do with, I think the painting's called Inside the Mall. So, I think that's what it's about. Ramblin' Rome, thanks a lot for that. Corin Henderson, I'm from Florida. Igitha says it's 5 a.m. in Melbourne. Igitha, are you kind of getting ready for the South Africans to play the Australians and the New Zealanders? Do you think it's going to happen? The World Championship, the Rugby Championship, I wonder if it's going to happen. Not looking likely at this point. Ninja Kitty, hi from South Carolina. I hope you guys in North and South Carolina are doing okay. I saw a video of a house floating by in like tropical rain, and I know that storm system's moving up there, so I hope you guys are staying safe. I believe it's hitting Connecticut area in a couple of hours, so it was quite sad watching it, because the person recording it said, this house floating by just missed a car, and then moments later another house came by and nudged her car, and her car drifted off, and you could hear her crying. So yeah, quite sad. Thanks a lot, SM Kovalinsky from New York City, and Anna, thanks a lot for that. 864 watching. Let's just hold on for another 150 or so. Let's give it another minute. Carmel Hughes, good to see you. Connie Lukens is here. Kelly Strom. Jeanette Miller says 7 dogs in my household. Wow, that is a lot. Benjamin Button, I'm sure that's your name, from Germany. Brunschweig. Eva Monzetti, was that from California? Polka Dot Suzanne says, I love your style. Thanks, Polka Dot Suzanne. Norma Lewis, hi from North Carolina. Maine Gal, how's it? Are you from Maine? Gabrielle Mays from, is it West Virginia? Carew Ross, thanks a lot, guys. Okay, so we've just passed the 1,000 mark, so I guess that's my cue to get going. So I've written a book called The Craven Silence, right? don't know if you can see that, The Craven Silence. And the title of this, and it's about John Benet Ramsey, the title of this live stream is The Silence of the Lambs. Who do you think that refers to? In the Summer Wells case, who do you think the lambs are? What do you guys think? When you talk about the silence and the silence of the lambs in the Summer Wells case, who do you think we have in our minds when we're talking about that? So Christy Lee says the family, Amy says the boys, Lauren says the children. Ocean's Daughter, thanks a lot for that, Ocean's Daughter. Ibby Dibby, thanks a lot. So a lot of you are saying children, boys, the children, the kids. Deborah, it's called the Craven Silence, right? Craven is sort of like a cowardly silence, right? And I don't know about you guys, but doesn't it feel like there's a craven silence that is starting to overtake this case? We are at day 67. I did a check a few moments ago. There have been no news stories on the Summer Wells case for the past week. And the last news story is basically to say that nothing has changed. There are no new leads. There's no new information. Thanks, Carmel. There's no new information. Everyone's still a suspect. Basically, that kind of nothing's happening. And so that was a week ago. That was on the 2-month anniversary of Summer's disappearance, right? Thanks, Mama Shi. And so, where are we now? 2 months and 1 week later, where are we now? So what is starting to happen is the news cycle has sort of dried up. The prayer vigils, I don't know if they've dried up, but they've certainly seemed to get smaller. The last one didn't actually even take place in sort of a place. It was sort of virtual. On the social media of Candace Hara, Candace Bly Wells, and Don, nothing has been happening either. So you kind of have this silence that is expanding, that is growing, right? There's silence to some extent on social media. I'm talking about the social media of the people at the center of this. There's silence to some extent in the media, the mainstream media. There's silence to some extent from the authorities, from law enforcement, right? And so what happens in that space, in that silence, is it sort of creates a vacuum. And what then happens is in that vacuum, social media tries to fill it. Social media, in a large way, YouTube creators, they try and fill that vacuum of expectation, of curiosity with something. And I call it manufacturing content, where you sort of try and make something out of nothing. Nothing's really happening, so you try and make something out of nothing. And it's a very dangerous place and a very dangerous time, because it's in this place where the media is silent, law enforcement silent, and some of these people are silent, that you start getting rumors that start floating around, and people can opportunistically take advantage of that. So some people can set rumors in play, and others can reinforce those rumors. Now, this isn't unique to the Summer Wells case. It's definitely part of the true crime scenario, and it's an unfortunate part of it. But, True Crime Rocket Science is a channel that is going to give you the information in a very microscopic way, but also in a macroscopic way. So we're going to look at this from the outside, looking at what everyone's doing, but also from the inside in a kind of microscopic way. So what I want to address is YouTube sometimes feels like that it incentivizes rumor and gossip. What I mean is something that isn't true, thanks a lot, Heather West, something that isn't true can gain massive traction, right? And so you'll only know this, you'll only really experience this as a YouTuber, where you might put something up in error innocently and it just gains massive traction. And the lesson, unfortunately, that you could learn from that is, well, why not purposefully mislead people, right? And there are a lot of people that have done that, that do that, that decide that the quicker, easier route is that route, right? Whereas if you're telling a straight story, if you're reporting the facts, you're going to have to work much, much harder. And so which route are you going to take? If you're rewarded for the rumor and gossip, why not go that route, right? So the other thing that I think is worth mentioning, so in other words, YouTube is susceptible to becoming like tabloid media. Like, it's like when you read the tabloids, you get hooked into a headline that isn't true, but you buy the tabloid only to find that there's nothing there, right? Nothing of substance. It's kind of like clickbait, right? Thanks a lot. Who was that? Ginger Snap. Thanks a lot for that. So, although, and this is the other side of the story, although it often feels like YouTube rewards and incentivizes these manipulators and opportunists, it does also support credibility. There are some channels out there that are credible, genuinely credible, and then there's some that sort of pretend to be credible that are sort of fake credible. But there is that side of YouTube as well, the credibility that is rewarded. So that's the other side. There are channels that try to get rich quick. With that approach, they often fizzle. They may do well very quickly over a very short time, only to fizzle over the long term. And I think the reason for that is they start to try to trump their last shocker. And eventually, when that's all you're trying to do is just shock, shock, shock. Well, besides losing your credibility, you eventually cross the line so often that you eventually cross it once too often, right? And so for them, the only way to make content is by crossing a line. And then it's only a matter of time before it's over, right? And we, in a weird way, entering that sort of territory now, that territory of channels where there's this dearth of content, so now they're going to try and manufacture it. I'm not sure how well some of you are informed, but quite a few, there have been a couple of videos that have been uploaded that have been taken down. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. There have been a couple of rumors that have surfaced lately attributed to certain people. I'm not going to deal with that in detail. I don't want to give too much to that, but it's starting, that whole thing. And the rule of thumb is basically look at the type of channel that is putting it out. And the other one is look at the source that they're quoting. You know, is it sort of hearsay, or can you like verify who this person is? Because anyone can say anything, right? Now, in the Chris Watts case, there's a particular channel. I'm not going to say what her name is, but she put up a video that Chris Watts had help. And she may have been convinced at the time that that was true, because you sort of saw a person coming out of the garage with white shoes, right? And that video got 2.5 million views. I put up a video saying Chris Watts acted alone, 15,000 views. What message do you think that sends out? It is, well, that people want to be shocked, right? And then what does a true crime channel do? Do they try and shock you, or do they try and inform you? Do they stick to the facts, or do they try to stray as far from the facts as they can, knowing what people want to hear? What do you think happens? And that's why I say YouTube actually incentivizes, it feels like YouTube incentivizes that sort of thing. And you guys play a role in that. You guys liking and responding to that play a role in that. And that is why my channel is a channel for critical thinkers. So if you, from my channel, go to another channel, please apply your critical thinking there, right? The world right now needs critical thinking. With the coronavirus as well, we need to think about things properly. In the Summer Wells case, there's this sense of mystery and unknown, and the unknown, what is happening? Has someone gotten away with something? And so absence of information is uncertainty, and that is where you've got to apply critical thinking. And I mentioned this book earlier, The Scout Mindset. The Scout Mindset's about gathering information, not defending your position, right? The Scout Mindset is about educating yourself, getting information, all that kind of thing. And my channel so far has been covering the Summer Wells case almost every day, probably for the past almost 60 days. I didn't cover it maybe for the first week or two, but I've been covering it pretty much every single day. And I'll probably do so for another 10, 15, 20 days. And then from that point onwards, it'll be based on information coming out, right? So I don't see myself covering it, past day 100 every single day, because I want to be giving you guys information on what is really happening. So in terms of the timeline, and I think this is really quite scary. Do you guys remember when the representative of the TBI, what is her name? Leslie Chisholm or something, I can't quite remember. I think her name was Leslie. She went on and she kind of gave a press conference and she said, and this was on the 25th, she said, 25th of July, she said, this case has gone beyond the norm. This is abnormal, the situation. Leslie Earhart, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Melissa. So Leslie Earhart basically said, I keep thinking Leslie Ahome because she was the press officer in the John Benet Ramsey case. But so Leslie Earhart basically said, at this point, and I think it was a month and about 10 days. So around about 40 days into the Summer Wells case, she said, this case is an anomaly. This case is strange. We are beyond the norm. That was day 40. We're now day 67. That is how far we are beyond the norm right now. And I have been trying to emphasize this for a while, the idea that there are excesses involved here. There are excesses involved in this family, in this situation that are way beyond normal. And the question is, how far beyond normal? Is it somewhat extreme? Is it extreme, or is it almost kind of unimaginable kind of thing, right? And what I think is being exposed over time is that extreme is almost, it is kind of past what a lot of us have imagined. We're seeing more and more information coming out. If you want to think about extremes, consider this. All of Candace's children are now removed from her, all of them. She had Andrew and Candace, her first two children with Andrew Simon. They were given up. I don't know how much that was a voluntary thing, but they were given up. Her boys are now also kind of in custody, and some is missing. That's 6 children. 6 children that are gone, right? That's quite extreme. It's quite extreme to have one child go missing. Now look how many it is that you not either allowed to look after or not looking after. And I made this comment earlier that if someone was found right now, someone could flick their, snap their fingers or wave a magic wand, or someone's prayer was answered right now. Do you think someone would be taken back to Chalet Wells and everyone would live happily ever after? No. And the channels that are apologists, they don't seem to acknowledge that. They don't seem to acknowledge, that they sort of see some of the people in this story as completely innocent, right? But if someone was found right now, wouldn't be taken back to Chalet Wells. What does that tell you? So I want to come back to this question. Who do you think the silence of the lambs refers to here? Who do you think the silence of the lambs refers to? So you guys have said the children. Do you think it refers to anyone else? Someone says the dogs. So Tragic says the parents. There we go. Ruby says grandma. I think grandma is part of the silence of the lambs. I think Rosemary is part of the silence of the lambs, right? So who has not been very silent? Don. Don hasn't been very silent. Don has been the most vocal, the most verbal of everyone, right? So the silence of the lambs in this respect refers to Summer, Rosemary, Grandma, to some extent the boys, and it sort of feels like that silence is also beyond that. We don't know who are other victims in this story. In my appreciation of this, I don't see the police's silence as the silence of the lambs. I see the lambs as the victims in this. And so the silence of the lambs are the victims. It is Summer, it is Rosemary, it's the boys, it's Grandma. And why are they silent? In Summer's case, I think there's one answer to that. But what about the living that are remaining silent? Raymond says the co-workers. Geordie Girl says lambs are victims, yeah. Maria Dethi, the three boys are also victims, yeah. You think Grandma is a victim? It's a good question. Is Grandma a victim? When you see Grandma talking about Rose, her daughter, it's quite touching. But then within the context of her not talking about this, you could say maybe she's not. Maybe, is she part of the problem? AK says, so many ancillary facts from the past are pointing one way. Such an odd and sad experience. Find Summer should be the focus of the public. Thanks for that. Someone put up a video where the title slide was really powerful. It was a picture with Candice Bly on the one side and Summer on the other. So basically showing mother and daughter, Summer's missing. On the other side, Candice Hara and Rosemary missing. So again, mother and daughter missing, mother and daughter missing. And it just made me think about this sort of intergenerational aspect. You've got the intergenerational thing happening in that respect, but you also have the intergenerational thing happening in a different way, in a more in a more silent and seditious way with the boys and the men. I don't really so much mean the siblings of Summer. I mean maybe other boys in the story, other sons of the father. And I did actually put up a video very early on. I think it was titled "The Sins of the Fathers." And I think in this story, it's a story about the sins of the mothers. And that video slide was really well done, as I say, showing a picture of Candace with Summer, and Summer's gone missing, and Candace horror with Rosemary, and Rosemary's gone missing. You kind of get a sense of the sins of the mothers, but they're also the sins of the fathers, and those sins are, as I say, kind of more sinister and seditious and silent as well. It happens in the darkness. It happens in secret. And I put on Patreon a video that was dealing with someone who kept a secret for decades. And I was just asking the question, is it possible to keep really serious secrets for a really, really long time? And you guys can go and look at it. It's the case of Sheila Keane Warren, who dressed as a clown and committed a serious crime 31 years ago. And then she went on and lived with the wife of the person that she'd disposed of, right? And so this secret was kept for 31 years by a couple. And so the mechanism of how this crime got exposed is really interesting. But the part that I want to emphasize is the fact that secrets can be kept. As unlikely as it sometimes seems, secrets can be kept. In other words, a crime can form the glue to keeping secrets like that. Another thing that I think we've got to bear in mind in terms of the context that we find ourselves in now is, after 67 days, it's a weekend again. Have there been any more searches? I find that quite bizarre. If you compare this case to Gannon Stork and Suzanne Morphew, it seemed like there were a lot of searches. There was a lot of search activity going on. And in this case, it seems like they've stopped searching. I mean, they didn't search last weekend. They haven't searched this weekend. Couldn't the church that are quite active in this whole thing, don't they want to be involved in searches? Aren't they allowed to? That is part to me of the silence of the lambs. Is that is it why aren't there any searches? Is it because something is known? Is it because there's no money? Are they waiting for something else to happen? So now I want to move on to the next sort of level, dealing a little bit with rumors, and I'm not going to deal with this in a lot of detail. Some of you know what I'm talking about, and those who do you can kind of discuss it sort of elsewhere. I'm going to just touch on this broadly. Someone sent a screen grab to me of a interaction, and it referred to a scenario where Summer was apparently half asleep, arrived home, and fell down the stairs. And that's this other version of events. Now, first of all, I don't think that is a credible version. I don't think it's a version from the family or from any person involved in the. So I don't think that is the case. So that's the first point to make. The second point to make is, could that have happened? And I think the answer is, if an accident happens, thanks Christina, if an accident happens, there's no reason to cover it up. A true accident, a random accident, an accident like falling off the stairs or falling off a swing or tripping over your feet, there's nothing to hide. So action like that, falling down the stairs, would also not really be something you would want to hide. But an accident where a child can't swim and you're supposed to be supervising that, and perhaps you're doing something else, that's not quite an accident, right? So in a situation like that where a child falls down the stairs or falls off a tree, there would be absolutely no point in hiding that from law enforcement. Absolutely no point. I'm simplifying it a little bit, but that's really what we get to. And now we're coming to another aspect, which I don't think this has ever been raised by anyone. And it's a very simple point. And it's this question. Did their paths ever intersect? Meaning, did Don's path intersect with Candace's on June the 15th at any point? Let me say that again. On June the 15th, did Don's path, his journey, his whatever, his movements, did they intersect with Candace's? Did Candace's path intersect with Don's at any point? Let me just take some of your comments here. Christina Logan, I think I did thank you. Thanks a lot for that. So a couple of you seem a bit unsure. So Slink says yes at 5:30. Deborah says maybe yes. DB says I think so. Birdie says, I feel like they did. Okay. I think Tragic says, I think she met him somewhere. Beverly Lawyer. Okay. Someone says possibly. Sunset says yes at 5:30. Someone says, I believe they did. Okay. So let's address this question. The question is, did Candace's path cross or intersect with Don's and vice versa? Another way of addressing this question is, does Don's timeline intersect with Candace's? Does Candace's timeline intersect with Don's? Now, what I think is quite interesting is one way that you can sort of answer that. What I kind of mean is physically. So physically, I can't lift my other hand up to show my hands crossing because my dog's lying on it. But physically, did Don and Candace kind of encounter one another, you know, in reality at a certain point on June 15th? If so, where and when, right? Right. So if you take a step back from that, you can say, well, a point at which they make virtual contact is apparently the phone call that Macbeth overhears. And according to my understanding, that phone call happened early-ish on June 15th, but I think there's another version that call was made later. But in any event, that phone call is one intersection in terms of just them making contact in terms of a communication. The reason I believe that call happened quite early was because it had to do with picking up Grandma's medication. And Grandma's medication was picked up before they went to the swimming hole. And just from what I've heard is that it feels like it happened early-ish in the morning, like I don't know, 10 or 11. And we're going to deal with that aspect as well. The murkiness and muddiness of the timeline of June 15th. That's the last point I want to get to. That's something Chris McDonough's, I think, going to be talking about tomorrow, the 40 minutes. And I just want to go a little bit beyond that. In any event, besides that call, there was the other call where Candace apparently called him, and they and he said, call the police now, hang up and call the police now, and apparently she did. And then they were Facebook messaging one another or something like that. So, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, when did they physically encounter one another? At what point did they physically cross paths? And the reason I think it's quite important is because Summer, the physical person, is missing. Whatever happened to Summer, that little body, that little person is gone. How did that happen? And just in a very obvious, ordinary way, a very obvious, ordinary question is, at what point did Summer's parents approach one another and kind of either comfort one another or inform one another one-on-one on the situation? You would expect any parents in a situation where their child has gone missing that at some point, preferably sooner rather than later, you would want a face-to-face encounter. Maybe you'd want to give that person a hug. Maybe you'd want to give them something else, whatever, information. And so at what point did Candace and Summer, Candace and Don, have their paths intersect? Now, what I think is quite interesting with this question is, if you take Candace's versions of events and you take Don's versions of events, right? In Candace's version of events, you never really hear about Don. It's her and Grandma and her and Summer and on and on and on and on. And then Don is only someone that she calls at some point. Do you get what I'm saying? Don is only someone that he's somewhere else, and then she lets him know, right? So that's Candace's side of the story. There's also not a moment where Candace, from the versions I've heard, where Candace says, well, and then Don sort of came up the driveway and there was like a dust cloud behind him, and he rushed past me, or he ran up to me and said, I know what has happened or whatever. You don't really have that kind of encounter. Now with Don, you don't have the other encounter either. Don's story is that the first place he drives to is the funky shed. And if you pay attention to his statements, there's not really a moment where him and Candace have a meeting or an encounter. The only family members he seems to encounter are the boys, and it's not even, you don't get a sense that it resonates or that it's real. It sort of sees the boys, but does he talk to them? He sees a neighbor, but does he talk to the neighbor? He sees the shed, but does he go inside? So it's sort of like this emergency where he rushes to the shed, but then when he gets there, what does he do? Well, he sort of does nothing. Does he look in the creek? Does he look in the shed? Does he talk to the boys? Does he make contact with Candace? Does he search with Candace or anything like that? And instead, the idea you get is that he is somehow operating independently the whole time. He sort of arrives at Chalet Wells only to leave Chalet Wells. And he seems to be absolutely clear on what the situation is. And you might say he doesn't need to see Candace because, how can I put it? Because she's appraised him of the situation virtually, so she doesn't actually need to. And he doesn't need to see the house because of the same thing. He doesn't need to actually look inside the house. It reminds me a little bit of the Chris Watts case, where Chris Watts said something like, it's okay if she doesn't get back to me, meaning Shanann. It's okay if she doesn't get back to me because I get it, she's busy, but the fact that she didn't get back to her people, that worried him. Now, a statement like that, no one would take seriously in reality because Shanann was pregnant and because he would need to get hold of her to find out where the kids were. And her friends were more worried about her and the kids than he was. Now, in the same situation, it just doesn't make sense that Candace and Don wouldn't want to see one another, as the people closest to Summer, that they wouldn't want to see one another and join forces and coordinate, in their efforts. Do you guys follow what I'm trying to say? And the flip side to that whole argument, you might know what you're reaching, and I really don't agree. Why do they need to actually come into contact? The flip side of the discussion is, in a scenario where parents have done something and they are cooperating, so in other words, where you have parents that are part of some kind of plot, then there'd be a scenario where someone is handed over to someone else. And so if that did happen, would you want to acknowledge that? And could that be part of a kind of a craven silence? Could that be part of why there needs to be this silence about the lambs, right? In other words, did they actually meet one another, and that part is not being acknowledged? That's what I'm trying to get at. It's just an idea because it seems something that should obviously be there that's not there. I could be wrong. It's just something to point out. The same way when Chris McDonough spoke to Don, he wanted to know, well, what time did you get to the driveway? What time did you arrive home? It's just a very obvious, important question. And when you got there, were there any police there? Yes or no? I think he sometimes said no, and sometimes said yes. The impression is almost simultaneously that there were no police there, and then there were too many police there, and it was all bottlenecked. But so which one is it? Gritty Gabby says red truck, red herring. It's quite hard to say. The red truck could be kind of a game changer. The red truck could be part of the fabric of this case. It could also be a red herring. It could be. The problem is we don't know the nature of the relationship between the red truck driver and I think his companion, because it sounds like there was a companion, and the people at the center of this case. And unfortunately, there are a lot of secrets, but it doesn't mean something that's a secret is necessarily very significant. Tabitha Burditch says, no one is paying attention to the fact that Candace was in Jonesboro. Not sure if that's true. Are you saying that Candace was in Jonesboro on the 15th? We can't be absolutely certain of Candace's movements after about 2:30. I mean, do we know for a fact that she drove home? Where were the boys also that day? That's also kind of unclear. That's part of the silence of the lambs, isn't it? Can you guys hear Timmy sort of snoring? Okay, let's look at some of your questions. Caroline has just woken up in Australia. She says it's 10 to 6 in the morning while your day's start and ending. D. Wanda says 4 hours were lost somewhere. Brazil says hot car. I've heard that quite a few times, Brazil. yeah, my personal opinion is that it wasn't a very hot day, and if it was so hot in the car, she wouldn't have dressed so warmly. Something that I do think is interesting with that rumor about Summer falling down the stairs is that she may have injured her neck in that fall. And I think it's possible that Summer may have injured her neck or suffered concussion at the swimming hole, that she may have dived headfirst into a submerged log, and that could have either knocked her out or hurt her neck in a situation like that. That happens all the time. Swimming in murky water with a lot of oddly shaped submerged objects all over, plus the substrate, the river bottom is particularly muddy and slippery. So that, I think, is definitely a possibility. But something happening in a hot car, sorry, I've heard that a lot. I just don't see that. Dodging water park. Kathleen asks, what did Macbeth, why would he have a reason to lie about anything? I don't think he's lied about everything. I do think, I'm not sure I'm not sure how much we can rely on what he said about arriving at home and Summer was fine, or he didn't notice that anything was wrong. He's vigilant throughout the whole thing, but when he leaves her, he's sort of a little bit vague on how she was. Nothing seems out of, and then if you had to ask, well, would he have anything to hide? Well, if he was consuming alcohol as a minor, I would say he had something to hide. If he was doing other things as well, so that's a possibility. Genia Stevens says, we had a swimming pool, and I remember my dad thought he was diving in deep water, and actually it was 4 feet, and he got 2 black eyes doing that. Yeah. That happens. Bria says, Macbeth said that Summer changed into the sweatsuit because she was going to Jonesboro to the water park. Yeah, well, I guess that's an interesting point. Maybe that was the plan, but what happened in the end? If something did happen to Summer, would they have still gone to the water park? What I think is quite interesting with the video, the last video footage of Summer and the last photo is, it seems to indicate that they were 11 minutes from home. So it does look like they were broadly on the way home. Things could have changed. They could have made a U-turn and gone somewhere else, but it does look like they were on the way home from there. And the question is, what happened after that? Did they go to Chalet Wells? Was there planting of flowers, or was there a visit to the funky shed? What happened? Okay, Timmy, I'm gonna put you on the ground. So I wonder whether there was a intersection of the timeline and of Don and Candace coming together at a certain point on June 15th. I wonder if that did happen. And if it did happen, would they say so? Would there be a reason to not say so? Or is it also not really a big deal? If you compare this scenario of the parents interacting with one another, so you have a situation of you've got 2 parents and their child goes missing. You take the John Benet Ramsey case. At what point do you have the parents together? And it's quite famous in the John Benet Ramsey case that Detective Arendt finds it very odd that the parents are separate all the time. So you kind of had John Ramsey and Patsy in different rooms the whole time. In their story, you also have Patsy sort of comes downstairs. I think John is taking a shower or something, but they never seem to be together. It's always the one is somewhere and the other one is somewhere else. In the Madeleine McCann case, you have the same thing. You have the one parent doing a check, the other one somewhere else, and the other one does a check, then the one somewhere, the other one somewhere else. And you sort of got to wonder, isn't it possible that at some point in reality, the parents did actually sort of stand face to face and have a serious conversation and make certain decisions, given the seriousness of the situation? And can you imagine what that conversation was if it did happen in all of these cases? Let me just look at some of your questions. Diana's talking about the length of her hair. Jade Wren says the school outfit might symbolize something else. John Hammer, 10 to 20. Okay, I didn't quite understand that part. Pink sweatsuit. Tragic thinks that something happened in the tub at home. By the way, that is happening all the time. I think they say a similar amount of incidents in an open water hole as in bathrooms at home, which is quite staggering to believe. Jean Karras, good to have you here. I'm not sure if I just missed seeing you earlier. Someone says bad weather. So, I've heard people talk about the hair quite a lot, and to me, a better argument, if you want to talk about that, is the teeth. I may be a bad example. I may be a bad person to prescribe anything about teeth because I don't have any fillings. I don't have any problems with my teeth, and I guess I take quite good care of my teeth. Not everybody does, but I do think the way that you care about your teeth says quite a lot about you. I think, taking care of teeth is something that requires discipline and standards, and also having a knowledge of health, and if I can put it that way, right? And so I think if you have teeth that are not in great condition, it's not the end of the world, but if you have teeth that are in a terrible condition, that is going to give you an idea of not only your attitudes in terms of neglect to someone else, but yourself. If you neglect yourself, the odds are almost certain that you're going to neglect someone else. Do you guys agree with that? Are you the investigative reporter? Americans don't all have dental insurance, very, very expensive. Now, I'm sure that is a factor, but I also think you can drink milk or you can drink Mountain Dew. You can eat candy or you can eat fruit. Those are everyday choices that aren't going to cost any money, that are going to improve health and teeth hygiene kind of thing. Vicky says, I neglect myself because I'm too focused on, I guess that's someone that you're related to. But that's benign neglect. Benign neglect is where you're still functional and you're doing it for a good cause. I don't know if neglect is benign when you addicted to something or you buy alcohol instead of food or whatever, then it's not benign neglect. Ramona says milk in a bottle at night causes cavities. Well, I would say Mountain Dew even more so. Just a hunch. Lots of candy all day. Okay, so we're at the hour mark. I wanna touch on two other areas, and then I'll kind of take some more of your questions. I've heard some people argue quite convincingly where they say you can care about someone but not do anything. In other words, you're not coping with a particular scenario, but you're not coping. That doesn't mean you don't care. So in other words, your caring can be invisible, your love can be invisible, you can fail to act. It doesn't mean you don't care. So in other words, you can care about someone and nothing shows in your face. So in other words, on the Sermon on the Mount, where Candace doesn't seem to be unhappy or upset, that doesn't really mean anything. Okay, so Fiona says, what do you think about Summer's shaved head? To be honest, I'm not quite sure why there's a big. Maybe it's because I've got a shaved head. I don't know if that's why I don't see so much in it. I do see the fact that Summer really loved Robin and she loved beautiful people, and certain statements in that respect don't add up, right? But she may have had a shaved head because of lice. It might just be for a practical thing. I don't know if I believe that the boys had shaved their heads and she wanted to be part of it. I don't know if I believe that. But to me, it's not. It's not. I know a lot of people are talking about it and thinking about it, but to me, it's not vital. If you do make the argument that her shaved head is very sinister, well, what is the argument? Oh, so Dana says, why wouldn't they say lice then? Well, as far as I remember, they did say that. I think at one point they did say that. That's from what I heard. I also think it's kind of obvious, and also if your argument is, well, there was lice, but they didn't say there was lice, it's probably not funny, but maybe they're embarrassed about it. I think I would be. So I think I don't think there's a lot more to that than that. They had a lot of dogs. They had quite a few kids. The home wasn't particularly clean, so I think lice would have been absolutely what's the word? Not normal, but it would have been predictable. So in that situation, it would have been predictable, but maybe some people would frown on that and whatever. I don't know. I think it would just be what you'd expect, but maybe it is something that they're embarrassed about. Ernji says, I wondered if the shaved head was punitive. I'm sure there was a lot of punishment being meted out at Chalet Wells all the time for all sorts of significant misbehavior and insignificant misbehavior. Cat's out of the bag says school was never an option, only the promise of it with an outfit. Premeditated? I don't think so. I know it's not what a lot of you think. I don't think this was premeditated, meaning the original incident, which I believe was an accident at the swimming hole. I don't think that was premeditated. In other words, I don't think anyone expected or anticipated something happening to Summer at the swimming hole. One aspect that is sort of premeditated is potentially what followed that, where you have the option of, as I compared with that other swimming incident, in an emergency, do you immediately call the authorities? Do you immediately call for help? Or do you immediately not do that? And then everything that follows that is kind of with deliberation. You are purposefully and continuously doing something besides what you should be doing. It's not quite pre-meditation, you might call it post-meditation, but it's a little bit different. Sky says, please hit the like if you're enjoying the live. Can't find ashes. So unsettling her last picture. To me, wants to be held again, seems to be. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the penultimate area for this live, and I want to deal with. So let me just finish my point about caring. So I found a really incredible video. I've shared it on Patreon of I guess it's an alligator trainer or something like that. Yeah, you're right about the grade 2. Thanks a lot for that. To me, if you want to make the argument about neglect, the teeth is a sort of a instant scenario. You can instantly see it, and you see it with Candace as well. Candace's upper teeth are also like that. You see glimpses of that in the Sermon on the Mount. So this whole idea of hypothetical caring, if you watch that video, it's basically a alligator trainer who is sort of showing off this alligator at a kind of a birthday party or something. And the next thing, the alligator clamps down on her hand, and within seconds, the trainer or the staff person finds herself at very close quarters with this alligator. She can't get her hand back. And the next thing, the alligator does that twisting thing, right? And she then she is turned because her hand's in the alligator's mouth. And it's quite a desperate situation. I mean, it's like there's no way she's going to get her hand back. And she's also like almost under the alligator. And the next thing, a father of one of the children at the birthday party jumps into this area and jumps onto the alligator, and it's called a death roll. And then not sure what they do all sorts of things, but the alligator eventually releases his grip. But that is caring. That is a scenario where someone is in trouble, they need help. But if you're going to help them, you're going to put yourself at risk. Well, are you? And there's a situation where this guy had no bond, he had no ties to this trainer. He simply acted kind of on instinct, but he cared. So that is the difference between someone who's standing there going, wow, this is scary and terrible, but doesn't do anything, and someone who does do something. The one is actual caring. The other one, you can say, well, I'm concerned. Well, if you really care, you'll do something, right? And I'm trying to compare that to the Summer Wells case. If you're presented with a tragedy and you care, you will do something. You won't try and cover it up. You will do something. Unless you are so used to covering something up that it's second nature. Unless you are so programmed, I won't say to not care, but maybe that is the right way to put it. Because if you're constantly taking substances, isn't that programming you to not care? Isn't the point in taking certain substances to not care? Isn't the point when you have a drink is that you can sort of care a little bit less about everything? And so when you take something stronger than a drink, isn't that the point? And so if you're presented within that scenario of whatever, of taking in a substance, you're presented with a scenario where you should care, but you don't. What can you say about that? So in that space is kind of a silence, and that is then what happens to the lambs. The lambs become consumed by that silence, and it's a craven silence. It's a I think a criminal silence. The fact that Summer's been missing for 67 days isn't because there's no foul play, it's because there is. Isn't because something criminal didn't happen, it's because it did. I think every day that goes by that we don't find it, the odds of it being natural, like, you know, a coyote carried her off, are less and less and less. If that did happen, wouldn't it have been easy to find a trail if that did happen? To hear a scream if that did happen? Wouldn't there have been other animal visits before that kind of thing? And so you've got to compare the pattern of accidental things. Accidents aren't that accidental, but natural things happening. So have there been animals visiting that property? Patterns of that happening. And compare that to, have there been incidents of neglect? Has that been happening? Have there been people disappearing in this family in other states or scenarios? And you just want to compare the two. I just want to see. I think I missed the odd super chat here. If I did, I'm sorry. So now I want to go into the 40 minutes. So this is something that Chris McDonough is going to talk about, I think, tomorrow. I'm going to be dealing with your questions. I actually really want to deal with this because there were some fantastic questions that I want to discuss, but we're already at 75 minutes, and I'm probably going to cap this live at 90 minutes. So I'll do the Q&A tomorrow around about this time. I've prepared everything, so I'd be quite happy to do it, but I don't really want to do it right now. I do want to talk about what do you think Chris McDonough means by the 40 minutes? Let's just take some of your questions. What do you think the 40 minutes refers to? The missing 40 minutes. Stacey says, I think this all began with the prescription. Ellen says it's a way to numb oneself to the reality. Heather says, I still think premeditated. Okay. Heather, I think the problem with premeditated is if you premeditated this, then wouldn't you have anticipated the attention? For example, if it was premeditated, you wouldn't want to draw attention to it. So why would they call Robin to the scene? Why would they call David Dodson to the scene? Why would you want to draw attention to yourself? And in terms of Rosemary, that case drew a certain amount of attention, and 2 years ago was the 10-year anniversary of that, and that drew a certain amount of attention. So if there was something like that, I don't know, why also would you want to go around town all over the place? But you never know. Sometimes things happen that seem crazy, like in the Chris Watts case, and they sort of are crazy. And you can't always say the criminal mind would act a certain way, because sometimes the criminal mind is not very smart, and that's why it's the criminal mind. Susan, I don't know if silence is golden in terms of this sort of thing. Dodo, I would imagine that there would be dash cam footage and also body cam footage. I don't know what Tennessee's approach is to releasing that sort of thing. I mean, we still haven't heard the 911 call, so they seem to be playing things pretty close to the chest. The parents could leave Tennessee. Okay, so let's go back to those 40 minutes. I did ask you, I don't see too many responses. What do you think Chris McDonough means by the 40 minutes? So I think it's tomorrow. Chris will be discussing a critical 40-minute window in the timeline. Where do you think that window is? Now, to be honest, I'm not really sure what that refers to. I've got an idea. It may be between 5:30 and when 911 was called, something like that, or after 911 was called. I'm not sure. Could actually be after 911 was called. My position is that there are several critical time windows that are a problem. There's not just one 40-minute thing. So I think there are all sorts of problems with the timeline for June 15th. Let's start with the morning. For starters, the morning is an inconsistent and incoherent narrative between Candace, Macbeth, and Alison. The good news is, due to the numerous stops they made that morning, we'll probably be able to reconstruct with some accuracy certain threads of the timeline as regards the morning. CCTV footage from the urban fabric of Kingsport may be very handy in this regard, as was the case in the Patrick Frazee case. What may emerge from this? Possibly that they spent a lot more time at the swimming hole than they've admitted. Also, there may have been an additional errand that no one has spoken about. Perhaps there was a visit to a dealer. Perhaps there was a visit to just a third party, perhaps someone who drove a red truck. That's been left out of the story. I still feel skeptical that Grandma was along for the ride the whole time. I don't know whether I believe that Grandma was at the swimming hole just sitting in the truck. Yeah, I don't know. If she was there, does it change anything? I don't know. In terms of the afternoon, both Candace's and Don's stories are difficult to make sense of. I doubt whether Candace can account for Don's movements and vice versa. Were Candace and Don together at any point on Tuesday the 15th? That's something I've raised a little bit earlier. Was there any point on June 15th where Summer's father and Summer's mother were physically next to one another? And what did that involve, and how long was that? And this is an area I believe many have overlooked. I believe it's quite an important area that's not been thought about very much. I think it makes sense that in an emergency, a genuine emergency, Don would rush home to Candace. He would rush home to her. Regardless of what they say, that would be your best way of getting information and coordinating a response and organizing what's going to happen. And yet in both their stories, they never seem to actually meet. But did they? When Candace admitted she threw her phone into Don's truck, whether true or not, this certainly conjures a scenario where a phone may have traveled with Don's phone. What is also fairly important, in my view, is the timeline following when Macbeth was dropped off at around 2 or 2:30. But that leaves, in my opinion, 4 hours that aren't explained. So from about 2:30 to 6:30, not 40 minutes. So I'm not going to take it further than that. Do you guys get the impression that the focus, certainly from the interview room, has kind of shifted towards Don? Have you guys gotten that impression that the interview room is more interested in Don? And do you agree with that? Just a hypothetical, not sure whether that's justified. Like, to me, the more important area is the swimming hole. And if something did happen at the swimming hole, I would have thought that that whoever was responsible for Summer at the swimming hole would be responsible. That would be my thinking. I also think it's very significant that Don drove the Subaru that day. That day of all days, why is he driving that vehicle? That is, I think, quite significant. I also think that, and I've said this kind of from the beginning, we had 67 days, and it was something like at 40 days, they were saying this case is out of the norm. So at 67 days, we are far beyond the norm. And I think that the lack of clues, the lack of clarity tells you how far beyond the norm we are in certain areas. I think each day that passes, what I'm saying is obvious, but it's nevertheless true. Every day that passes, 6 days, 67, 68, 69, how many days are we going to get to? In the Suzanne Morphy case, it was 365. In the Madeleine McCann case, it was 14 years. In the John Benet Ramsey case, it was arguably a couple of hours. But in this case, each day that passes, the suspicion surrounding what really happened to her, why she's been so carefully hidden, ratchets up. Do you agree? Something seems to have been hidden, and that's why there's this silence of the lambs. The silence isn't natural, it's unnatural. It's an unnatural silence. And it feels like secrets are being kept, and in time, those secrets will be uncovered. You guys believe that? Danielle says they usually wait a year to bring it to court. Bridget says Grandma's absence and silence speaks volumes. Vicky says, could there be a ransom? Well, you would think that that would have been communicated by now. Christine says you still can't place responsibility on a 15-year-old. Yeah, that's true. Denise says that Don apparently said we pulled in there and then changed to I. Well, that was something I highlighted in one of my videos. Not so much that, but apparently he said we went up there, meaning when he left the road to go towards the shed, said he did change it from we to I. So that is definitely quite interesting. Rebecca says, I wish you'd interviewed Don or Candace. I don't think they would really want to talk to me for good reason. But if someone doesn't want to come clean, then I think I'm the channel to talk to. But of course, if you say you're coming clean and you're not, it's not going to be a very long interview. Patricia Burns, the time between getting home and calling Don. Yes, ring him up. Okay. So, see, there's still about 1,900 of you in chat. I'm kind of done with the analysis here. What I do want to, I'll take a couple more of your questions for another 5 minutes. And then I want to refer to an article in the New Scientist. It's about, you may think your dog likes you more than it does. And I really just want to talk about our perception, even with an animal, that may be really way off. You know, we may think we, as the true crime community, that we're quite good at certain things. But you may think that your relationship with your dog, you might think that your dog likes you a lot more than he really does. And I find that quite interesting. I think it reflects more on the owner than the dog, though. I think it reflects more on you and the fact that you need to be humble about what you think you know. There are a lot of things we don't know, and that's why you need the scout mindset. You need to be curious and get more information rather than have a position that you know what the answer is. Stacey M, thanks a lot, Stacey, appreciate it. Don often makes pronoun mistakes. Mac B, thanks a lot, you too. Dogs are pack animals, they follow the alpha. Okay, so I'm going to go through this. If there's some more questions, I'll deal with them. It does have a bearing on the Summer Wells case, but we are going to drift away from it to some extent now. So the question is, what was the true nature of Summer's bond with her family and vice versa? What is the true nature of the bond that her parents had with, or that the parents had with their children, right? And I think there's a simple way of addressing this, but I want to interfere with that first by looking at what we think we know about our own pets. And we think we know them very well, and we think that they really like us, right? So this is from an article in the New Scientist dated 19 June 2021, and it refers to dog owners tending to overestimate the bond that they have with their pet. And I sort of feel like a lot of people, especially early on, I felt that a lot of people, I thought, overestimated the bond between Summer's parents and Summer. You might say it's totally different, but it's quite interesting what they say here. They talk about we need to develop better bonds with our dogs for our own well-being, but also the well-being of the dog. And so it refers to that they did a test, and what they did was they looked at how dogs roamed away from their masters. So if dogs were taken to an open area, did dogs, how far did they roam? And then they compared this to the sort of the way that the dog would in terms of the reunion, when the dog comes back to its owner, and then they sort of compared that, and what they found was that the dogs that strayed the most showed the most apparent joy, the most emotion when they were reunited with their owner. But these were the same dogs that strayed the most. So in other words, the dogs that were the most bonded actually strayed the least. They didn't run off as far or as long. And of course, they didn't need to show a lot of emotion because they were sort of with their owner. Why? Because they were bonded to them. And so it was easy to misunderstand that emotional response when the dog reunited, meaning that, well, my dog really, really likes me. It actually just meant something else. So I'm just going to quote from the article. They said, it's possible that people place too much weight on their dog's enthusiastic greetings as a sign of bonding, right? So I know when I went on holiday, I left my dog behind, and I was quite disappointed when I got back that he wasn't doing cartwheels when I arrived back. I thought, wow, my dog actually doesn't really like me that much. And I think the real reason was the place I left him was very happy because there were a lot of other dogs. And so I don't think he felt alone. He may have missed me for a while, but I think he felt at home. There were far more people around him all the time and animals. And I just think he was a happier dog as a result. I think if you'd left him alone in a room with nothing in it, no matter who he'd seen, he'd be really, really happy, whether it was me or somebody else, right? And I wonder whether you can compare that to Summer and Robin, that Summer being so enthusiastic in her greeting of Robin, and also like having no boundaries there. Was that because of a sense of devastation at home, a sense of being almost lonely at home, vulnerable at home? Again, you might think it's insensitive, but if you imagine it from that very simple psychology of an animal that is just in a very basic way neglected or alone and just wants to be touched, just wants to be held, wants to be acknowledged, right? Something else that I've highlighted from the article says here, 28 kilometers was the furthest distance from home that a dog was tracked. So in other words, a dog that was feeling like it wasn't quite getting the sort of stimulation it wanted could stray 28 kilometers, right? That's a dog that is really hungry for attention, I'd say, hungry for something, right? So also highlighting from this article by Krista Lestelazier, this article is titled, "You May Think Your Dog Likes You More Than It Does." She writes, outside opportunities for food, exercise, and socialization could all affect bonding. Let me just say that again. Outside opportunities for food, exercise, and socialization could all affect bonding. Now, think about this in terms of a child or any person. If you have a home situation where there is food, I'm not really going to say exercise, but let's say play, enjoyable play experiences, and socialization, where you're socializing with your own family, the extent to which that's present is going to have an impact on bonding. And there's a great video of Don with his boys on a Ferris wheel, where you really get a sense of the real dynamic, a genuine sense of the dynamic between Don and his kids, right? That's really what we are learning as time goes by. We're learning more and more about the actual family dynamics. That's really what we want to know. But Summer's no longer here. So in the place of the silence of the lambs, we've got to wonder what was going on with the bonding. What is the type of bonding going on? Was it healthy? Was it erratic? What was sort of going on? Thank you, Jade Wren. Thanks a lot for that. So this is from Paul McGreevy at the University of New England in Australia. So he was saying this in terms of dogs. If there are outside opportunities for food, exercise, and socialization, that could affect bonding. Now think about Summer going to the church, and there's an outside opportunity for socialization, a kind of nourishment beyond actual food, a kind of nourishment that this little girl needs, right? According to this guy from Paul McGreevy from New England, the University of New England, he says, these aspects are critical to dog welfare and represent needs that must be met by its caregiver, both for building attachment and for curbing roaming behavior. So important. Again, I can almost see some of you saying this is totally absurd. a little child is nothing like a puppy or nothing like a dog. The one is an animal, the other one is, but what they're trying to talk about here is this idea of if the needs of this animal aren't met, he's going to roam. If the needs of this animal aren't met in the home, it's going to roam, right? It's going to look elsewhere, right? And so you can also imagine that just in a very basic way, a child in a home that is not safe or not comfortable or not right somehow, isn't that going to lead the child to wander off? Isn't it going to lead to the child being curious, like, I'm not very satisfied with this. I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't feel safe with this. I'm not very happy with this. So I'm going to go there and try and get that there. So if it's at the church, I'm going to go to Robin to get the warmth that I'm looking for. If I'm at home, I'm going to go to the swing, or I'm going to go to a puppy, or I'm going to go somewhere else to get that. If I'm at the swimming hole, where am I going to go? But doesn't it create the scenario of going somewhere, wandering somewhere, roaming somewhere, in source of an experience of life, an experience of play, an experience of something that is sort of safe and enjoyable, right? Because the alternative is something that's not fun. And I'm not sure if you've been in a situation where people are drinking around you or they're drunk around you, but you're not. Are you going to linger in that area? If people are watching a football game and they're sort of quite inebriated, but you're not interested in football and you're not interested in drinking, are you going to hang around in that area? What if you're a child? Right? So it goes on to say, so if these critical welfare needs aren't met, it's not going to curb roaming behavior. So if your animal, your pet, your dog is neglected, it's likely to roam. If your dog is loved and feels that its needs are met in terms of all sorts of things, then it's not going to roam. And I've definitely experienced this with my dog. Often when I'm working, even if I've just taken him for a walk, he'll come to me and he wants to play. And I kind of groan. I'm like, I've just taken you for a walk. But basically what is happening here is he's saying, well, my welfare needs aren't met, not in such sophisticated words, but basically that I still need more of you. You can't settle down to work now. I still need a bit more. And then he can settle down and he can be quite calm. Look at him now. And I think the same applies to the child. To the extent that you don't meet those welfare needs of a child is going to possibly feel distressed, but they don't know why. Unsatisfied, somehow there's a wound that is building in them that they actually can't give a voice to, that they don't have that perspective of themselves. And the fact that you're playing with them, the play isn't so important as that it's suggestive of I'm patient, I'm available, I'm accessible, I'm gentle, I'm here for you, I'm here, I recognize you, and I'm giving you my time, I'm paying attention to you. And that is something that is reassuring. It gives, I think, an animal and a child a sense of value, right? So again, Paul McGreevy says, if any one of those three pillar resources is lacking, food, exercise, and socialization, in place of exercise, I would replace playing in the case of children, and food, perhaps with the kind of nourishment that a child needs, not necessarily food nourishment. He says if any one of these three pillar resources is lacking, that can be justified in going elsewhere. So even a dog in the relative, sorry, Timmy, in the relative obscurity of a dog's reasoning, of a dog's psychology, He'll be feeling, I'm not fulfilled in this home. And then he's going to wander off somewhere else in search of that, right? And can that not apply to children that are chronically neglected or worse, that they feel, I want to wander, I want to be somewhere else, I want to go to school, I want to go to Sabbath school, I want to be somewhere else, anywhere but here, right? And then the final part here is about, and this is where children are brought into the article. Listen to this. And this is quoting from the article. Unlike children who loosen bonds with their parents as they grow older, dogs can become more attached to their caregivers throughout their lives. Isn't that interesting? So children loosen their bonds. I do think that is quite interesting, because I think some children's bonds don't loosen. Some children become very dependent, and some children regress. And children that do regress actually become more clingy, and that's something I've addressed quite a lot as well. But it is interesting that if you do develop a bond with your dog is going to become more attached to you. So we'll see if that happens with Timmy. We'll see if maybe next year or the year after, when I'm doing a live stream, is my dog going to be in my arms the way he is now, or is he going to be like, stuff this? And so it concludes to saying it's never too late to work on building that bond, playing with your dog, just spending time with him, getting to know him. And he compares this to, she compares this to a human partner. And the same applies to Summer. Did someone spend time with Summer in a good, affirming way? Did someone build a bond with Summer in a good, affirming way? Did someone get to know her in a good, affirming way? And I think one person that certainly did, that it certainly feels like did that, was Robin. And that's good to know. It's good to know. Okay, so I think that's about it for me. Just look at your comments here. Bria says, sorry you came in on that comment. How are you, friend? Is Stephanie here? So very, very sad. Yeah, Bria makes the comment that, did Summer have a meal on her last day? That's also such a subtle but significant insight, is if something serious did happen at the swimming hole, then you can imagine them not stopping to have lunch, right? In other words, if something unexpected happened just before Macbeth was dropped off, you can imagine the whole afternoon was given over to certain activities, and lunch being the last thing on your mind. Of course, conversely, if things were normal and natural, well, you should have had lunch at some point. So I think a very simple question, perhaps with not a very easy answer, is when did the boys have lunch and where did they have lunch? The boys. I think if that question has been put to them, it should be put to them. Where did you guys have lunch on the day Summer went missing? What did you have for lunch? I don't know if they would remember. Where did you have lunch? What did you have for lunch? Who gave you lunch? Right? And I think it would be quite significant if lunch didn't feature. It's a really good point made by Bria. It's also something that Chris McDonough brought up at some point, is he was taking us through the movements of Macbeth and Candace on June 15th, and he was saying, okay, so they went to Sonic and they went to I can see the places. I'm kind of a visual person, but I can't remember. let's see if you guys can help me out. That's how good you guys are. What was that place where they got the hippie house? That's the one. And then I think they also went to a discount store, and they went to Walgreens, and they went to Priceless, right? And they went to Sonic, and in all of this, there's no lunch. Quite bizarre. Fiona Sand. Thanks, Fiona. Where were the kids when Jose was there? Yeah, good point. Priceless, that's it. Slushies at Sonic, but no food. And that I think is also a good analogy for this whole idea of having resources to buy. Wow, there goes my voice. Having the resource to buy certain things, but choosing to buy junk with it instead. Having the resources to buy food, but buying substances instead. That's a choice. That is showing where your caring is. And I mentioned earlier, using the analogy with the alligator, if you are in that situation, but you high or you intoxicated, and someone is in an emergency situation, and you're in that place of, you're on cloud nine. The whole point of that whole thing is to not care. And now someone is in a situation that is drawing on you to care. Are you going to care? If you've been in a situation over and over again of getting high and not caring, why would you care in that scenario? And I think the long-term answer isn't where your heart is actually with those substances, isn't what you really love, the feeling you get with those substances, isn't what is really going on is you're addicted to substances. You're not addicted to your child. Your feeling of care and of whatever isn't directed to a person. It's directed to a chemical. Nessa says, my question is, how have such unintelligent people managed to cover this up? So, Nessa, I think the answer is, first of all, assuming that is the case. I don't think, in other words, I think what you're suggesting is someone getting away with something, they're managing to to get away with it. Well, I think we get the answer to that in intertextuality. You look at the Barry Morphew case where it looked like someone got away with what happened to Suzanne Morphew, and it turned out not at all. There's a lot of evidence that's come out. In fact, the preliminary hearing continues tomorrow on Monday. I might be doing a live recap just of the details of that case tomorrow. But that was a case where it seemed like nobody knew anything. There was nothing going on, and a lot was going on. It's part of the strategy of law enforcement. I've got to say that I can't really imagine that this case will drag on for a year. I was actually saying this to someone that I don't think it's going to drag on for 6 months, and I'd be surprised if the situation we're in now lasts beyond 3 months, which is effectively 90 days. 90 days is not that far from where we are now. I don't know whether someone drew a line in the sand and said at that point we're going to do something, we're going to act, we're going to whatever. But it's possible that they said, let's give ourselves a bit more time to gather more information. I do think what makes this case problematic and difficult is it may hold hands with the disappearance of Rosemary, and also it may not just be one person that needs to be held accountable and maybe not even two, but more than two. And that then makes it more difficult to, for example, in the Laurie Vallow case, you had two principal agents and a lot of other activities going on, two principal agents plus Alex Cox. And that makes it a much more complicated crime and requiring a lot more time to investigate. So I don't think it's so much that someone's getting away with something, that the police want to give, the law enforcement want to give themselves the best opportunity to gather information. And if you think about how much we have learned as the true crime community in the last 60, 70 days, every day I feel like we're learning something new. To me, I'm going to interfere with our bond by putting you down, okay? Down on the ground, not putting you down. Someone from New Zealand, I believe they've locked down the whole of New Zealand because of one coronavirus case. I wonder how you feel about that, Jessica. Jessica Cross says, I feel Candace may be suffering from CPTSD. So Jessica's point is that Candace is kind of a victim. What do you guys think about that? One thing that I will say on that topic, I don't want to talk too much about it, but one thing I will say is, if there is some element of SA in this case, and someone wasn't the perpetrator of it but was aware of it, do they have a responsibility? Are they a victim in that scenario, or are they an enabler? What do you think about that? So I agree with Elisa, who says, I think, Stephanie, I think you can release that message. Stephanie says, I think it's possible to be a victim and a victimizer. True. Often they do go hand in hand like a bully. I think you mean complicit. Enabler, yeah. I think the more difficult question is when you take the fabric much further back and you say, what happens if you were born into this situation? So you were born and your parents treated you a certain way. It's the only reality you know. And you then repeat the cycle. Are you a victim, or are you innocent, or whatever? To some extent, I acknowledge that argument, but at the end of the day, at what point do you say, I'm an adult and I have freedom of choice? I can, every time I choose to use the substance, I can also choose not to, but every time I actually choose to use it, right? At what point can you give the entire blame of everything you do to somebody else? At what point is what you do your choice? You are accountable, as Cheryl says. I'm not saying that doesn't have an impact and that it's definitely part of the strings that are pulling people, but you have a choice to cut the strings that are pulling you. As an adult, at any point in your life, you can say, I'm being torn apart by this. I don't like the shadow. I don't like living in this person's shadow or that person's shadow. I'm going to cut those strings. I'm going to forge my own path. Anyone's free to do that. It's called breaking the cycle of abuse. I did it. Well done, Cindy. There's a saying, it says, simple and as difficult as the saying is, but just say no. You know, if you're doing certain things and it's not helping, just say no. Well, it's as easy and as hard as that is. Break free. Every time you do it, it's your choice, absolutely. I know there are a few people who seem to think that Candace is some kind of unwilling slave or some kind of, she's sort of going along with things that, and she doesn't have a choice. But did you guys catch the audio where Candace is shouting at Chris McDonough over the phone? So Don is saying certain things and then Candace shouts over the phone as well. That kind of breaks that spell of Candace as the sort of mute victim at these prayer vigils, and she's actually got a voice. She's not a lamb. The silence of the lambs doesn't include her. She's got a voice, she's got a position, and she and Donna are actually quite, I won't say they've got a good relationship, but they are certainly partners of a sort, perhaps beyond marriage. I mean, they are supporting one another. They are, you know, it was pretty ugly. JT saw that she was very vocal. I can't quote what she said because it's got expletives in it, but I think one of the words was idiot. That's it. Mediocre comedian. They are simpatico. And if it is a case of partners, you know, how long has that been going on? I do think if you are involved in drugs over the long term, you've got relationships that go back a long, long time. You've got experiences that go back a long, long time. You've got you're covering certain things that have happened in your past over a long, long time, right? That's part of the fabric of that kind of lifestyle. What I think is quite interesting is, as far as I know, I think Candace and Don have been together. I could be wrong when I say this. Thanks, Raymond. Candace and Don have been together, I think something like 11 or 12 years. I could be wrong. But I think almost around the time that Rosemary disappeared, Candace and Don have been together, right? So at least 12 years. But they've only been married for 5 years. So I think they've been together for about 7 years and married only for 5, which in a weird way is kind of surprising, isn't it? Angela Powell from South Africa. Thanks a lot. Angela, you're up quite late, 11 o'clock at night. I hope you're keeping warm. So I don't know if you guys know, they got married on, if the thing I've seen is accurate, they got married on the 31st of August, somewhere around there, 2016. So almost 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago. So in 10 days from now, it'll be their 5-year wedding anniversary. But it is interesting that they only got married about 6 months after Summer was born. I think that's quite interesting. It's interesting that that they had one child, then another child didn't get married, another child didn't get married, had Summer, and then eventually after the 4th child, a couple of months after the 4th child, got married. Piscean Princess says, hurt people, hurt people. Piscean Princess, are Pisces supposed to get along with Capricorns? Just a random question. Littlest Hobo, I wonder why she didn't take the well's name. I think she did, but that is a good question. Because I have two Facebook profiles, Candace Bly, Candace Wells, is definitely an interesting question. SD says, where did they meet? They met, I think, in Wisconsin. And I think Candace said that she met Don through, I can't quite remember, it was in the Rogersville Review. I covered it in a different live. I'm not sure if it was through his siblings or her siblings, but it was kind of an indirect thing. Okay, guys, we passed the 2-hour mark. I don't think I'm going to take it further than this. I still haven't actually had dinner. Cindy says in Utah. Johan de Kock from Cape Town. Wow. Marie Swanepoel. A couple of South Africans here. But I'm afraid I'm about to log off. So guys, if you haven't hit the like button, please do. Let's see if we can get it over 1,000 likes. Cat Jersey Shaw, thanks a lot. So I'm going to be logging off. For those interested in the Madeleine McCann case, I'm going to be putting together a video that I think is huge. I think this should be making world headlines. Instead, we're getting this nonsense about a suspect. I do think it's very interesting that 10 days after the photo of the stairs going down into the basement, and this whole idea of the dungeon in Chalet Wells, 10 days after that, you had this same kind of stuff coming out in the Madeleine McCann case, almost like someone was watching the Summer Wells case, and I really believe that is happening. I really believe the McCann apologists and people involved in that are watching the Summer Wells case, and if an abductor has to materialize, if just for whatever reason we've all been completely wrong and it turns out there was an abduction, I can tell you now there'll be an instant message from the Madeleine McCann camp, that Summer Wells is the Madeleine McCann of Tennessee or something like that. Trying to build a kind of intertextuality that I believe doesn't really exist. But what I think is interesting, and someone mentioned it the other day, that 10 days after that photo of the stairway going into the basement, you had Madeleine McCann, the story about did something happen to Madeleine in this dungeon, and the same kind of wooden scenario going on. I really got the idea that someone was watching it and thought, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's use that kind of thing. Patricia Burns, they definitely do have a responsibility. Red Becky says, I just tuned in, I missed it. Good night. That is about it, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. But we were actually an hour later than we normally are on the weekend. So I might be back, I probably will be back tomorrow around about this time, between 2 and 3 or so Eastern Standard Time. I'll be taking your questions. I have been screen grabbing them and copying them and recording them, some of your best questions, and I'm going to be dealing with those tomorrow. And you're welcome if you've got questions that I still haven't seen here in the chat, then I'll try and attend to them tomorrow. Becky Rogers says prayers for Summer and her brothers. Pamela says I agree. Okay. Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen The Silence of the Lambs, try and watch it, and I'm sure you'll get something out of it. It definitely is one of the most powerful crime dramas that you're likely to watch. So if you can try and get hold of it, try and do so. Cat's out of the bag. Thanks a lot. Fair winds. Thanks a lot there. Sharon Tuck says, please like and subscribe. If you've been commenting, well, it's because you've become a subscriber. Thank you for that. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.